each restaurant has tens, dozens, hundreds of dishes.
Yes.
So how are you going to get information, an average information of all of that from just your circle?
Right. So social networks and word of mouth is essentially the concept of social networking is around that. It's word of mouth, digitized or not. And that exactly suffers from the limitation that you described. So we want to open that up and say, hey, someone is not in my social network, but they've been to a great Chinese restaurant last night, which is actually pretty good. And I have data from their visits that they've been to that place, or more people have been to that place in terms of repeat visits and such. So it's actually a measure of a rating or review. Every time there's a location visit from a particular place, that's equivalent to a rating or review that we can start using and say, this is objective data. It's not based on some random person that you don't know, but
how they
might
can
be the
write a
case on
review.
Yelp. Maybe biased. It's based on real data that you can start using. Hi, my name's Ash. I'm the CEO of Friday Night Labs. It's a pleasure to be here at the Den, surrounded by the lions of the Den.
That belongs to the first part.
That's good.
That's okay.
That's okay. So yeah, by background, I've been building internet products for the last 10 years and more. My co-founder and CTO has been doing that a little bit longer. We've worked for companies like Yahoo and Google and worked high-scale internet products. And deep down, it was always bothersome to us how our personal data was used, misused, and not really put to good use, right, in terms of value.
Collecting it and wasting it.
Collecting and wasting it, essentially. That's a good way to put it. So what Friday Night Labs is building is a marketplace for our personal data. The core motivation is that our personal data should be useful to someone else. And with blockchain technologies, we can actually have efficient marketplaces that have good primitives around ownership, high value exchange via native tokens, and also inherent privacy by design, which encourages sharing of personal data. Right? So that's our big vision, basically about efficiency of personal data exchange. And to keep it to make it very real, one of the use cases we can think of is around our location data, right? So just maybe an example that hits home is, let's say it's Friday night, convenient, that's the name of the company, but you're looking for a Chinese restaurant in Fremont, right? So what's your scenario? Usually you go to a Yelp or a Google Maps, and then you type in, hey, what are you looking for? And then you scroll past the ads, and then there's like 40 different results, and this is actually proven in data.
Actually, that's not okay. Can I
Go ahead.
Can I challenge? Actually, it's not what happening in most of the cases I was part in. Usually, we ask somebody like,
sure,
what do you think, and he immediately come with some solution.
Yeah.
So it's not.
Who are you asking, though?
You.
So yeah, that happens. So word of mouth is
usually we ask the person who kind of local, right? If I go to Palo Alto, I know the person who's living here. I'm saying, okay, guys, so where do we go? He said, okay, here's the spot. We go there.
Yeah.
There are actually like 10 spots in Palo Alto, which sucks 90% of all the people. That's what I.
Yes, that could
in the
be
university
the case.
streets, right? In a couple of parallel streets,
yeah.
that's the spots, right? Yeah. Everybody knows it.
Yeah. So let me address some of those points. So we'll go step by step, and I'd love to be challenged. So this is not just
you can count on me.
Jason's already.
There's a reason I'm sitting next to you. No. So yes, word of mouth is effective, but I keep going back to efficient. Is this the most efficient way to find a solution? How many, the third time you ask me or Chris for, hey, Chinese restaurant, what do you think? They'll be like, hey, dude, just use Yelp, right? Or Google or what have you. So I think the common person would probably think that way, and that's the usage behind these products.
If I can add one thing before I forget, because I know a little bit more about Friday Night Labs than the users or the audience does right now. I guess if I think about word of mouth, the value of word of mouth is limited to your sphere of influence.
Yes, this is actually right.
Your people who might have similar taste to you.
Yes.
And also a limited number of experiences.
Exactly right.
Right? If your friend says, I'm vegetarian, I don't eat any meat.
That's right.
Their recommendation is going to be harder to compare to someone who eats meat.
Correct.
Because you can't get that information from them. Each restaurant has tens, dozens, hundreds of dishes.
Yes.
So how are you going to get information, an average information of all of that from just your circle?
Right. So social networks and word of mouth is essentially the concept of social networking is around that. It's word of mouth, digitized or not. And that exactly suffers from the limitation that you described. So we want to open that up and say, hey, someone is not in my social network, but they've been to a great Chinese restaurant last night, which is actually pretty good. And I have data from their visits that they've been to that place, or more people have been to that place in terms of repeat visits and such. So it's actually a measure of a rating or review. Every time there's a location visit from a particular place, that's equivalent to a rating or review that we can start using and say, this is objective data. It's not based on some random person that you don't know, but
How they
might
can
be the
write a
case on Yelp.
review. Yeah.
Maybe biased. It's based on real data that you can start using, right? So we feel that's valuable because that gets the bias out of the system. And one second.
Can I ask, is it a Yelp on blockchain? That's what you're doing?
I wouldn't characterize it as such, because Yelp is fundamentally a UGC-based approach. So it relies on user-generated content, right? So it's and that actually, so that's why I was trying to finish my point, which was that suffers from the 1% problem, right? You're familiar with it. You never even know what that is. So we've all used Yelp or these similar services, but very rarely do we actually write a review. So I've been to I eat out a lot, and there's a lot of good data that I've collected somewhere which is not being used, right? So that's the key idea. How do we get from 1% to 100% of the data set so that we can then start having interesting insights and start moving it around? That's the key of the idea.
But blockchain will not solve that. Because it's not a blockchain, it's just like a distributed database, right? So you won't solve the problem by just letting people...
That's not the biggest innovation in blockchain.
Well, it's not, but in terms of the Yelp on blockchain...
It's not Yelp on blockchain.
Okay, so give me that idea. Yes.
Maybe this helps. Yeah. What specific data points are you collecting?
We can actually do very well with just locations and timestamps.
Locations and timestamps.
Yeah. So the way the app works is we have privacy mechanisms in place. So you onboard, and it never asks you for any real life identity, no name, emails. Literally press a button. There's a wallet that's created behind the scenes with a small amount of seed in crypto to start with. And we start tracking background location information with exclusions for home, work, anything else that's sensitive. But the idea is that it just seamlessly works behind the scenes, where it already knows the restaurants I've been to in the last week, or the bars I've been to, or any local events I've been to. So there's no necessity for me to write a review. It just happens by virtue of me living my life.
Come on.
So if you were to put some smart contract or back-end analysis on figuring out which restaurants or locations were the best, you would essentially take the frequency of visits based on power users, or just in general total number of visits, as well as the length of the visit. I guess those would be the kind of two major...
Yeah, so it's the data science pipeline. We can actually extract a lot of good value with just simple measures that you described. So maybe if I've spent 2 hours at a particular restaurant, that's one vote. If there's repeat visits in the same month, that's a very strong vote. So you can then build a profile and say, well, this person usually goes to Italian restaurants, so their vote from this new place is pretty important. So the idea is, Svet, maybe this will appeal to you. So
no. That's a different perspective. That's actually changes how I looked at it.
Yeah.
Now I look at your startup and your product differently, because that's may add value.
Yeah.
It's
the 100x part of it.
Well, I can also change that idea, and I will, but it's not, as I said, Yelp on blockchain. That's different, because they do not actually go and physically have to write that, right?
Yes.
They just have to visit, and then, of course, there is statistics and then machine learning and so on and so forth.
That's right.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So it's
better. And another piece that I from hearing talk before, you've got incentivization as well. Which is the big thing of
And
the other big piece of blockchain is
everyone wins.
It raises the question of privacy big time because basically there are two types of scenario. Either you hide this data, it means the service is centralized under your authority, or it's on blockchain, it means that everybody can see it. It's just like a little bit kind of a thin line you have to work.
Not quite. So you can actually be sovereign on your data if it's encrypted on blockchain via your private keys.
I see. So you have these options. You can can encrypt.
Right. So the core principle is, and I'm sorry to interrupt earlier.
No.
It's just I just wanted to.
I do it every time.
We're here to learn from you.
As I said, I interrupt everybody.
Svet's job is to challenge you.
Yes.
We still want to hear what you have to say.
And by the way, we know each other more than a year already, right? So that's
This is not the first time.
first time we're facing each other. For a lot of different reasons.
So let me just do a quick side. The first time I met Svet, I think this was a while ago.
Yeah.
It was at the den with the class, and within 5 minutes of saying hello, it's like, I disagree, you're ridiculous. It's like, that would never happen. So, but
it was a good reason, right?
It was for good reasons, right? So we approach problems from the different angles, but I really respect Svet's, you're able to very incisively get to the key questions, which you have, right? So that's great. You raised the question of privacy.
Yes,
right?
I
That's very important, right? We're a no-name startup and say, hey, you're going to track my background location. How do
I'm cool with Google having it, but you...
So there's a couple of different ways to handle that. So first, some people are naturally inclined to be less privacy sensitive and try out blockchain stuff. So that's the crypto enthusiasts community in the Bay Area, which actually is, we found by some estimates, doing some initial research via Coinbase and such, we may have at least 100,000 crypto people in the Bay Area using wallets.
Wallet
so that's a good enough community for us to start. Remember, we only need a small level of critical mass to get started. If you get 10,000 people in the South Bay, we can start having some pretty good ratings and reviews with background data to get this started, right? But the privacy concern then is, first of all, we have some guarantees. So initially, we don't have your data ever leave your device. Right? As a general principle, we never see users' data. Right? We can do some automatic analysis on it, but we're not able to identify and say that Chris has been to this particular place or what the location history is. You have pseudonymity.
Pseudonymity, yeah.
Pseudonymity.
We were discussing that earlier.
Say that 4 times as fast. Right? Pseudonymity. Right? So it's the Bitcoin model, which is why we're a Bitcoin fan. And, that's another reason why.
No, it's perfectly all right. Everybody's Bitcoin fan. Look at that one.
Yes. So the pseudonymous model actually works really well for us because then you have a good enough level of privacy where you can basically have public addresses and collect data and do analysis on top of that without actually knowing what the data is. Right? So the data is always encrypted. It's always in users' control, either on the device or for backup reasons or analysis reasons on blockchain. Right? So that should solve some of the privacy issues. I understand initially there might be some, that's where the hustle comes in, and we have to convince people that this is safe and completely private. We can also open source the part of the application that actually writes to the user's device or to blockchain, the code part of it anyway, open source. So there's going to be, and we can also do security audits with outside firms that say, hey, this
validate
is legit.
that portion.
And will you be using some tokens of your own there?
No, so we don't want to do that.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that.
Okay.
Yes.
And let me go a little bit meta on you, right? So money only works if it has very strong network effects, right? So what we don't want to see is a world with, hundreds of tokens. You go to Subway, you got to pay with Subway coin, pizza coin, plumber coin, right? So it's that's.
Why not?
By the way, that was the first discussion we had. So here's some unresolved.
Remember, right? Yes,
remember,
that was the first one.
And
That's
then your point was it's all automated. But the thing is, complexity in the system is bad. And at least I'm not saying this is the case with all ideas. At least for me, I just want an efficient marketplace that converts personal data into money, makes it tradable. So then you gotta then ask the question, what's the money that you want to use, right? So then the properties of money come into play. So we want something that's high scale, scalable in terms of transactions, that's got good support, enough liquidity to get started. So that means we don't need to have our own token because that's not our interest, right? So our business model is actually not the tokens and the appreciation or inflation in them. No pump and dump here. We just pick a high scale native token, let people trade in it. And then there's business models that are possible in terms of brokerage fees, basically a market making.
You just said native token, but I assume you mean not your native token. You mean like probably some maybe token or coin, right?
Yeah, I meant the native token of the blockchain.
Of the blockchain.
And it's not our blockchain, so by extension, it's the, so we use a Bitcoin-like.
However, just to, I'm trying to find the weak spots in your beautiful architecture because actually I agree that makes sense. Actually, collecting data, and there is no such application which I know, which is not asking people to post review immediately. But as soon as you go with any types of token, you need to QIC in ML. You know that, right?
If we use existing chains, we don't. And if we're non-custodial,
well, you have to do that whether you use it or not. But you can use another services of another company. You can kind of outsource this QML in MAC, but still, you will have the private info of your users somewhere, either in your servers or whenever you choose to.
You don't need them.
No, we don't.
Yeah. You're just tracking addresses.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be tied to a name at all.
Let me maybe if I can just provide some clarity, right? So think of a non-custodial wallet, right? That's the core of the application, okay? And you agree that those don't require AML and KYC, right? If you have a non-custodial wallet,
to create your own wallet it's just yours, right?
Right. So it's non-custodial.
The type of the wallet.
Well, non-custodial, it doesn't. The users have their own private keys.
Exactly.
That's not subject to.
That is.
We never have ownership of the funds, right? So that doesn't require. That's actually exempt. The latest FinCEN guidelines 2019, which I read every single word of. Which still doesn't provide enough clarity. Thank you, Vincent. But it's a step in the right direction. So they specifically have an exception for what's called unhosted wallets, which is loosely translatable to non-custodial. So that's what we are. We're providing the software where users have their private key and they're making transactions with another user.
The facilitator,
it's just like non-custodial wallets. So by extension, then if you have a service on top of that, what is money in blockchain? It's just data. It doesn't matter if it's Chris's location history or his money. It doesn't matter.
It's treated the same.
It's treated the same. So that's the issue, or that's the opportunity we have, is we're actually not subject to...
Yeah.
Anyways, that's my position. Go ahead.
You come prepared.
we sent all these questions before.
That said, the Den does not provide legal advice. Check with your attorney. And so, channeling in here.
I didn't expect actually you read it, the latest FinCEN. It's only like a month old. But you did. Excellent.
On top of it.
Already 3 points for it.
Jason, I wanted to check with you and see if you had any input on these.
Not so much. No. I think it's wonderful. One, I was applauding because just take a sovereign token that's already out there and build on top of it. Why get all crazy with
why complicate
having? Yes, every layer that you add is just more complications you're taking on. So why do that if you don't have to? I think that's awesome, and for sure, just collecting pseudo-anonymous data and using it for interesting things is.
So you like it, right?
You know that's what I like to do. So
yeah, I know what you like.
So I'm raising a seed.
But you have to be objective.
I'll take your wallet right now. Those are very good questions. So yes, the mark of a good founder, which I am trying to become better at every single day, is to look yourself in the mirror and see your delusions, right? Because we're delusional. We are every single day, right? Yeah. So it's about looking at the risks. And the biggest risk, actually no one's asked me about this stuff, is the regulation and stuff. Because, the obvious question is, why can't you do this with AWS and PayPal? Well, you can, but not with the privacy guarantees and efficiencies that blockchain provides. That's the point.
Yep.
You can have 200x cheaper transactions via high-scale blockchains today. By the way, that's new. The technology's been out there for 10 years, but it's only in the last 6 months to a year that they've actually become scalable. Right? So now I can do high-volume transactions with Chris's data, Svet's data, Jason's data.
You're doing
exchanging it. on a transaction per transaction basis. And that's important because the other thing with FinCEN is you can't batch transactions.
They have to be
as soon as you batch, you're in control, which means you're custodial.
That's correct.
So we can't batch transaction, which means we need very, very small nano payments, right? 1,000 satoshis here, there, fractions of a penny. I can't pay 10 cents on PayPal to do that. No. So we have a solution that's 200x cheaper, which can actually make this happen today with users actively trading in a high volume capacity and owning their data in a privacy sensitive manner.
Okay.
Hold on. So my question is, so you're doing Bitcoin Cash then? You on Bitcoin Cash?
Well, there is...
because we're talking about scaling and transactions, and I'm like, hold on now.
So
we're not talking Bitcoin.
Maybe you have a similar question? Did you?
No. That's a good point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
let's just dive into it.
So the question is about scalability, and I'm very excited about this.
You said Bitcoin-like earlier, so I was like, okay, two things.
There's a reason I said Bitcoin-like. Bitcoin-like, right?
Is it Bitcoin SV?
You did say Satoshi.
He's like, thank you very much, sir. Show yourself out.
But
we'll have that discussion. All right. So the trilemma applies, guys. Right? Decentralization, security, scalability.
Yep. It's my favorite.
We're not so much in the decentralization camp, right? So adequate level of decentralization is fine. We do need scalability. We like Bitcoin security model, right? So, and it's been proven in production and such. So that's the right Bitcoin family of chains is right for us. Then by process of elimination, BTC just doesn't make the cut, right?
Yeah.
Unless you believe in Lightning Network
That's what
and such.
I thought.
And
That's Bitcoin's Satoshi vision.
I'm not here to dump on any other chain. But it's Lightning Network, more power to them. Hopefully it works. But I'm an application developer. I don't want to be that close to the silicon. Okay, I want to build on a scalable, stable platform today, right? So it's either Bitcoin Cash or BSV. That's what you're left with if you want to be with the Bitcoin family. Okay. And with Bitcoin Cash, there is some concern that I have around the stability of the protocol and developers mucking with it. Right? Again, we want to be very close to the user. Yeah. So I want a set protocol that I can use for the next 5 years. Okay, and I don't want random surprises and outages every 6 months, hard forks. And there's some developers that want improvement and such. I don't want any improvement in TCP/IP. That's the chain to me. If you were starting Yahoo, I used to work at Yahoo, but it's like TCP/IP to me. Okay, I don't want to change it. It's got to be set. I want to be able to build on top of it.
Here's my proposition, because we certainly need a different episode about Bitcoin Satoshi vision.
We will have a full episode on that. Right now,
I won't because I'll get sued.
But what's good and what this podcast will lead to.
Are we?
So my point is,
I'm happy to talk about Craig if you want me to.
I think we don't have enough time because
that's a whole other episode, man.
Let's keep this one on topic because I know this is like
go off the rails.
5th or 6th Pandora's box that we're going to open
today.
No, we're keeping this one closed.
I see the opening now. So,
but no, my point is that what's good is hearing from you the thought process on the pros and cons. Like myself, I don't care like what is being used, who thinks this or that. All I care about is the end user, right? If what we care about is adoption and actually growing stuff. If one blockchain protocol makes more sense for that product, for that approach, than another.
Absolutely.
I want to know what the pros are that led me there, what the cons are that led me away from the others, and why this particular approach makes the most sense. And what's good is you just went through from Bitcoin all the way down through the different forks, the different thought processes to if SV is primarily focused on staying and not changing. And that's what you want. Stability. That's the way you described it. It's focused on stability. And you don't foresee any changes, you foresee the scalability and everything for your product. Say you actually reach the peaks of what you want as far as usability, millions of users dumping their data on the chain every single day, and you believe that it can reach that and you're not going to have too many bottlenecks or issues. I see no reason why not to focus on that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That is our thought process.
Yeah. So hopefully I could just like round that off right there for now. Obviously,
you good, man.
we can go. Yeah. But I'm glad that we thought about that. So anyone who's listening can also think about it from a logical perspective, right? Like, forget the emotional aspects. There's so much emotion and philosophy embedded into the entire blockchain and crypto space. Especially for a new person, it's extremely hard for them to navigate that.
Absolutely.
And get down to the nitty gritty. Right now, with what I'm trying to do, what approach do I take?
And that goes back to the previous point we were discussing, guys. The 0.3-0.4% of the world that's even tried crypto, that's not going to cut it for us, guys.
Yeah.
And now it's like, it's scary for anyone to join this whole crypto thing. It's toxic.
Yeah.
You look at Twitter, there's like mudslinging matches.
That's scaring people.
Like, hey, I'm staying away from this, right? Any engineer, any sort of informed person's like, hey, what's going on? I don't want to touch
Hands
it.
off.
Hands off, right? So there's a lot of, so we need to change that, and that's going to come with real people solving real problems in the context of use cases that are available now.
Yeah.
Right. So beyond even payments, I respect the payment part of it. The sound money, I'm a big proponent of that. However, I just don't see that happening in the United States. I just don't. In Silicon Valley, you want to send, $10 to someone, forget crypto. There's Venmo, there's free, Chime is a service that no fees, right? That's cheaper than crypto in some ways. And then they say, hey, no way, we're in sound money. This can't be debased. Venezuela, this and that. Yeah, this is not Venezuela, right? So I don't see the payments thing just happening. It's all about consumer apps.
So you're looking for different than United States market for your application? That's what you're doing?
Well, we're starting here. So I think if you look at the whole stack of utility for blockchain applications, I think payments is closer to the chain itself, obviously. And I think that's going to happen more in the developing world. And there's very good projects that I respect going on in Asia, Africa, others. But
can you name us a country where you kind of were your first target? What is it as a country?
For my company?
Yes, of course.
Not just country, right here in the valley. Right?
But you just said that it's not going to happen in the United States, right?
No,
so you start
using
here.
the payments.
The payments adoption, I don't see happening.
Too many regulations.
And that's a disappointment because, guys, we lost 10 years of great innovation. I mean, what can we do that Venmo can do, or all these stupid mobile apps that build gigantic businesses?
They just work.
We could have. Hey, there's beautiful wallets out there, and we could have done so much of that. If not 7 years ago. But we lost all that time with all this infighting and all these stupid issues.
No, I don't
focusing
think we
on adoption.
lost these 10 years. Okay, come on. I mean, only 2 years ago we got no more than probably 3 coins. Which everybody knows and everybody uses, right?
So I'm talking about payments specifically, but hear me out.
But that's application. We just started.
No. Hold on.
2 years ago.
Time out. In 2009, you could have used Bitcoin as a payment mechanism.
No, you can't. Because in 2010, you have you have to install your node in order to be able, only in 2011, one of the most usable wallets.
You're talking about usability, you're talking about all those things.
No, I'm talking about the payments, because in order to use payments, you need to have wallets and then million of them.
So you're talking about adoption of payments.
No, I'm
you're
talking
talking about like just
as a payment mechanism.
Just like forget everything else. If you chose to, you can do it.
And I'll throw in the next piece, which is the technology behind it. And if you're running into fat blocks and things like that, how are you going to buy groceries? You have to wait for 45 minutes to get something through. Let alone the regulation of who's holding the wallet at the time.
Right.
And if your grocery store now is holding, depending on how the wallet structure is set up, they have to be a money handler on top of being a grocery store. Come on, it doesn't make any sense.
And by the way, about the payments, don't forget about Lightning, because that's a different type of game. So it's a second layer on top of the Bitcoin to change everything in terms of payments. That's what I'm saying. I think we are a little bit impatient. It's just very complicated technology.
I don't think Lightning's the answer. That's my opinion. We could spend a whole
I know you don't like it. I don't like it.
Here's the nuance that I feel. We have had, and technology matures. I take your point. It's I'm not being impatient so much about it. What I'm saying, my question is about focus. We've had 10 years of very good technological innovations. We've had very little usability issues solved. We've had very little marketing issues solved. We've had very little design issues solved. The fact that a user, the common person's heard about Bitcoin, but what the hell is this private key? And what do you mean if I lose it, then I lose all my funds? Well, get out of here, right? So there's a lot of education around it. Well, you should probably have, you use hierarchical, actually HD keys didn't exist in 2009, so you had your wallet. It's usability issues. But the point is, we could have matured the ecosystem faster in a direction towards adoption by focusing on these people-oriented issues, as opposed to big blocks, small blocks, this, that, hey, how does it scale to 100 million? Well, you only have 10 users.
Yeah.
So it's all the usability issues, right?
The other issue is that a lot of money came into the space, and a lot of people became much more focused on just extracting money out of it than building the technology out. The internet, when the internet was growing, you couldn't just throw a website out and then have a ton of people spend money on it, and then you just take everything. And you've already, at the most base desire, you've already reached your goal, which technically should be 10 years out, where you have to get users adoption in order to get that payout, as opposed to, I'm just going to put out this white paper, get a ton of people to fund me ahead of time, and then it's too early for regulations to catch up, so I'm just going to go to the Bahamas. And that's the other major issue, I think, with this the way that everything has progressed.
Well, I see your point. I disagree, but I think that the end conclusion is right. So we need more people looking on the application side.
Yes.
And you are one of the people who are doing that. And I think actually your project makes sense. So I can find a couple of other questions I can challenge you with.
Sure.
But I think that we need I like your point that we need applications who works without us caring about that.
Yes.
Yeah. Because we have so little time left in our lives just to live the life without pushing all these buttons. And I really appreciate startups who just can't say, okay, you can unramp, install this application, that's your choice, and you're probably gonna be having some coins or not having some coins, but that application will give other people this one and you that one, right? You made that choice once, install it, and then you live your life ever happily ever after without opening this application every day
and value and
pushing numbers inside it.
Right. So and there is an engagement part of it. So so it's you're correct about the blockchain handling. I if it were up to me, I wouldn't care if the common person doesn't know the wallet stuff and all this. I just want them to solve their problems, right? So there's push notifications, there's a search interface and all those kind of things that we can learn from existing applications. So there is an engagement part of it. But the blockchain part of it, it's the plumbing that happens behind the scenes. It's on autopilot, like you mentioned. So that's a good way to face it. So yes, and in time, if we are lucky to find adoptions, we want to go into other personal data marketplaces, just have more pieces of personal data. So location's one, and it's high value and easily verifiable. That's why we're starting with it. But you can imagine your browsing history being shared. Everybody's getting nervous here.
Oh wait.
No, but let me give you maybe a long tail, but I think a usable scenario here, right? For blockchain experts, no one's an expert in blockchain. We're all students.
Aficionados.
I consider myself a student of blockchain, right? So let's say I've been studying this stuff for almost 4 years now, and I've kind of gone through the motions, and my browsing history is, let's say, higher quality than it used to be 4 years ago, and it's higher quality than someone who's joining now. Back to the point of toxicity.
How do you measure quality of browsing history?
That's with the question.
You could, in terms of, you have to seed the system to say, there's some sense of belief. So I'm going to go out on the limb and say that what Svet's reading is higher quality than, let's say, someone who's just gotten onto Twitter.
How do we measure that? That's difficult.
You mean it's more valuable to someone else?
Okay, so let's forget the quality aspect. But let me ask this question. There's a student in college right now, okay? And there's UCSC as these courses and such. And that person is thinking, maybe I want to see what people who are actually in this space, where are they spending their time? Mm-hmm. Okay? Yeah, which white papers are they reading? Right? Forget the quality.
Okay.
Right? But what is Ash Sharma looking at this week blockchain related, not the other stuff. Thank you very much. But what is Svet reading? Which white papers, right? If we can bundle that up and share in a privacy sensitive manner, so you don't know it's Svet's data, don't worry. But someone at UCSC doing this blockchain course, will they pay 25 cents for it? I bet they would. I bet they would pay more. So browsing history is valuable. It can be shared. It's all it's going to chat.
That is valuable.
So
I am betting it.
So that's like taking.
Why are we talking about the browsing history? You want to use this browsing history?
Well, what I'm saying is it's a pattern. It's an expansion of personal. So we want to be. Our vision is to be a personal data marketplace. We hate to see.
So you want to sell your data to?
You want to trade it. You want to not advertise. There's no advertising.
Maybe this rounds it off. If we think of Yelp as the UGC compared to your approach for location-based tracking, you could take Twitter, based on what people are talking about, and then instead you take that as a UGC and compare it to utilizing browsing data. Does that make sense?
Twitter or other content,
where
Facebook or
LinkedIn, putting their thoughts out as
Yeah.
opposed to what they're trying to absorb.
So we're several months away from that, but that's another extension, right? So we're not limited to just location. We want to expand to be a personal data concierge for this marketplace, which I'm betting is valuable. Yeah.
So how much time we have left for?
We're rounding it off right now. Let's hear Jason's.
So just because 1,000 people likes what Svet's reading, or maybe there's 1,000 Svets, and one person's like, 1,000 people have read this particular article. Just because the majority of the people are doing something doesn't mean that it's quality. Quantity doesn't mean quality.
No, 100%. Which is why I think everything that Ash is thinking about doing or like working on requires some solid data science behind it. Right, some analysis, figuring out based on the data which of these you'll have to define which one of these users or sources of data is higher quality.
Okay, well, let me address that.
Svet is actually reading at least dozen shitty white papers every week. I don't think
find one good one. He's with 1,000 terrible ones.
Yes, so that's not equality.
Let me address that. So browsing history is just so you're looking at URL visits as the only signal. There's more signals. Mm-hmm. How much time have you spent? Have you spent 90% of the time looking at the shitty white papers? I hope not.
Well, I have to read white papers which come to my attention because otherwise I cannot figure out what's going on because there is most of the project doing the shitty white papers. I have to report that and say, okay, guys, here we are. Okay. Most of our white papers are bad.
It's like me. Right. I picked up McDonald's earlier today because McDonald's is easy to pick up. Do I love McDonald's? No. Would I much rather eat almost any other restaurant?
But
real restaurant, yes.
But think about it.
But if my data's populated with McDonald's,
but there's a data point. This is what it all comes back to data science. Eventually, you could apply some machine learning, AI,
with multiple signals as well.
Yeah. So in the case of McDonald's is a fast food place, right? Meaning that your time there is going to be a lot shorter. That is a data point that could be
today, where it took me 40 minutes to get the.
But that wouldn't be the average. That wouldn't be the average data point. You see what I'm saying? It all comes back to how you analyze the data. But and this is big data. This is what everyone in the Valley's talked about for forever. Is with enough data, you can find patterns. You can determine with AI, with machine learning, you can find patterns. You can figure out what is generally more quality. Is that fair enough to say?
Yeah, that's fair enough to say. And let me also put it this way, okay? Google, Facebook, and all these big companies have the sharpest AI minds in the world working on their data stuff. And they're not short on data, right? They're short on quality data.
I probably can name you another organization.
And they're also serving up what's the number? How many websites is Google actually serving up through their search engine?
Like 0.3%?
Yeah, of all the data that's out there. Yeah. So
right. So I mean, you're actually making my point, which is it is a data problem, right? So the big data part is actually commoditized, right? But if we can get more people in the ecosystem with signals that are actually not even on the web, right? So the fact that you've been to McDonald's. If you have location enabled, maybe Google has, but it's not on the web. It's not usable to so many people outside of Google.
It's only usable by Google. I get it. That's the point on itself. Is Google is the only.
But I'm saying, I feel like the majority of the data that's going to be served up will get into the same Google scenario where it's only the point whatever percent is actually that's being sought by customers, even though you're sitting on 99 point whatever % extra data points.
Well, how much do you need to create value? No one knows. It depends on the case.
I'm saying there's a data problem inherent.
Always. I completely agree with you.
It's a valuable data problem. So the 99.7% of data that we don't use, we don't pay for. So it incentivizes the creation of valuable data. And we don't have to use every single data point. Yeah, I think that's appropriate, but the use cases can still be solved for.
Yeah. So I think now's about as good a time as any to wrap up. We could go on many of these, like pick a Pandora's box.
Every week.
We could go down it. But we'll have to save those for a later podcast. This has been definitely one of my favorite podcasts. I have a lot of fun diving into the previous topics.
Mine too.
Yeah, thank you. So to close, Ash, is there any announcements you have? Any places people can find out more about you? I know you were trying to do some market research as well.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from people. You can find us on LinkedIn primarily. So it's Ash Sharma, Friday Night Labs. I'd love to hear from anyone who would want to provide feedback on the application, especially if you're not in the blockchain area. I'd love to hear
extremely valuable data.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Thank you.